house from the field in the rear, took the specimen in the back door, and down the cellar stairs. The Negro had been knocked out, and a moment's examination showed us that he would permanently remain so. He was a loathsome, gorilla-like thing.
From someone who loses patience during a fucking fade to black, it probably surprised you to hear that I'm actually a huge fan of H.P. Lovecraft. Stories, comic book adaptations. All of the vaguely similar storylines with none of the build-up, atmosphere, reliance on imagination, depth, mystery, or, you know, racism. And a good thing too, since his views invalidated his life's work, so I'll just put this down here and never look at it ever again. Making the biggest desperate struggle I have to face, finding anything that actually succeeds in accurately capturing what made his stories so uniquely scary outside of his stories. Not just in other books, because just trust me, but in other mediums like movies, music, or I don't know, games? There we go. Sure, some came close. A lot of what I felt playing the Tomb Raider reboot could best be described as maddening, unimaginable terror, although I usually tone it down and just go with torture. And to be fair, there are a lot of reasons why it's insanely difficult, if not impossible, to translate them exactly, but lately it's the tendency for developers to just completely miss the point, lazily stick a fucking tentacle on it, hue it green, and think that that one board game was actually a good idea. It wasn't. That was, however, until a concept from the 90s promised otherwise, eventually resulting in Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth in 2005 that would change that completely. It was brown. Starting promisingly, kind of in a way almost like Call of Cthulhu, as you lead a raid on a bunch of cultists, although that is starting promisingly in the same way that the Challenger started as a space shuttle. It didn't fucking end up like one, because quickly it makes sure to get ruining it out of the way nice and early by showing some green and a tentacle. Although look, going back for a second, I get that showing something unimaginably horrific means it's no longer unimaginable or horrific, but when what you're showing me is that, do you think you could not? Despite the intro, title, and throwing in some references to other stories though, the game actually follows a shadow over Innsmouth, but like my busted TV that I'm too poor to replace, I'm just gonna have to put up with that because it's a game based on a dead racist weirdo scrawlings from the 1930s. I'm lucky anyone cares enough to give me this. Sometimes I wonder whether it would be more socially acceptable for me to admit to having killed like 15 people, honestly. Although, on the plus side, the Cthulhu name is more widely recognized, making the game marketable to a larger audience. Let's try not to think too much about the intense market research and countless meetings that went into trying to justify that fucking stone-cold blatant lie. Following a shadow over Innsmouth, the game takes place entirely within the small fishing town of Innsmouth, even though they push it a bit, having levels set on the very outskirts, way out to sea, and even thousands of miles beneath, but still technically in the town. Because, shockingly, turns out a run-down, isolated fishing town makes for an interesting and varied video game setting, as an angry, loud, constantly complaining loser makes for good YouTube content. It doesn't. Although the first hour or so just set in the town centre before everything kicks off and having you just at your own pace explore, take in the rotting scenery and be shunned, insulted or ignored by literally everyone is a lot like my childhood, but also easily the best and surprisingly most faithful to Lovecraft part of the entire game. Not only in the game though, but just outside of Lovecraft in general, which is insane, impressive, and I don't want to ruin this nice bit of positivity I've got going on here, but I did only say the first hour or so. Everything from the two colours, the eerie ocean sounds, the perfect word-for-word recreation of the hotel escape scene, the, let's just say, very relative residence. Everyone is relative. Everyone's a relative. And how you're made to feel enclosed, trapped, and being constantly watched in an open environment all contributes to the feeling that a lot of passion and work clearly went into making this. This being the first hour or so. Ruined it again. Because after, and it just so happens that the decline begins the moment you are given the fucking double-barrel shotgun. I'm sure it was probably due to the budget or rush development though, right? Jarringly, the game's atmosphere, subtlety, and pacing suddenly goes from,
I heard there was a killing over at the old Waite's house tonight. They reckon the old fool killed his own daughter. Caked head to toe in her blood, they says. And had to be dragged away, screaming and crying. I reckon there'll be a lynching for what he done.
To this.
Take your fire! Over here, Jack!
One of my many personal issues is not that Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth is a first-person shooter, believe it or not, because I can accept that, plus it's already proven it can make it work. Also, again, I'm lucky to have this. What else am I gonna play? The board game? It's just another classic case of attempting to please everyone pleases no one, or at least attempting to please me never does. Every level has at least some intended stealth sections, and it tries to give you that staying out of sight and avoiding enemies is the safest and easiest option garbage. But oh, just in case, here's way more health and ammo than you would ever need. Don't use them though, but they're there, you know, just in case you want to beat the game inside of this decade and to not have to keep hiding from patrols every 2 minutes while you're trying to fuck around with the borderline impossible puzzles. Sure, I guess you could always play on a harder difficulty to make everything more tense and to force you to have to be stealthy, which is a good idea, but just make sure to have unlocked the options first by having already beaten the game and experienced everything so you can't enjoy it anymore. Sneaking up on enemies only means you'll have a more accurate and steady shot at the kind of execution move this game has, where hitting a revolver shot in the back of the head kills them instantly. Surprisingly, I hear that also works in real life, if any of you plan on giving that a go. But that saves you like 1 extra bullet and costs you triple the time. That's valuable time I could be spending doing other stuff. It really doesn't help that the combat on the beginning difficulties is by far the easiest part of the entire game either. Why, I have no idea. Plus save points are so close to each other that it's obvious straight away that just running through an area to map it out first before reloading is a smart way to abuse its design. At least that's my method of playing this anyway. I call it not correctly. In the event that you do take a hit though, I hope you've been through 5 fucking years of medical school to cope with this game's biggest, most original, unique, and only idea being the healing and health system. Presumably a lot like you and me, whose bodies consist of 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and probably a head, your body in the game is also divided up into these parts, each with their own hitbox that can take a range of different damage types. Also like you and me. That was a threat, by the way. Everything from minor cuts to major lacerations, fractures, infections, and poisons need either a bandage, suture, splint, or antidote to properly heal, and depending on your supply, that slash across your chest might have to wait in favor of the open wound on your forehead. Or failing that, just get a nice bit of morphine in you and drag that exposed bone across the floor with ease, like it's not even there. I've never used the word wince in my life, but I cannot think of a better time. So basically, it's the best health system in any video game I've ever played, my favorite easily. Do you hear that though? What is that? It's me back again to fucking ruin it. In direct contrast to that though, there's also a mental health system that's so good, get this, that no one knows it even exists. Seriously. Like I hinted at, the puzzles in this game are numerous and take a fucking next level high IQ genius in some cases, so naturally they weren't a problem for me, because I had a walkthrough. And in the walkthrough, I noticed that they'd warned the player not to look at corpses or monsters for too long because you'd lose a sanity point, and from here I started seeing warnings against readying a loaded weapon in case I became suicidal. Too late. Trust me, I tried so hard to kill myself. No one wanted that more than me, arguably. For hours I tried everything, for nothing. I could not get it to work. For a huge variety of reasons, that sucks, but mainly because sanity is such a huge aspect of both the Cthulhu story and this one that they obviously reluctantly and painfully needed to implement it anywhere they could, despite having nowhere they could or any idea how to. Comfortably anyway. Because one aspect of the sanity system I did find was one I literally could not get away from, and I wanted to, believe me. Jack Walters, the character you play as, has a fedora, a deep complex personality, and a whole list of things that he's scared of. Not that you're scared of, but him, and that's rule 1 of horror games. You're supposed to be him. One of these things is heights. Now, personally, I'm fine with them. Jack, however, when tackling one of this game's many platforming sections, starts uncontrollably vibrating, slipping in and out of consciousness, and talking to himself. So instead of being immersed in the shoes of this alcoholic, morphine-addicted detective from the 1920s, I feel like I'm constantly next to him, either dragging him through each level or trying to talk him down from a panic attack. And guess what? That's less fun than it sounds, and it doesn't sound fun. Because instead of scaring the player directly, the game had the great idea to tell you what you're supposed to be scared of by showing fear on your character through these really nice, enjoyable visual effects and filters while you're being shot at and trying to make difficult jumps. Currently $3.99 on GOG, by the way. Swoop in. Obviously, I did not get what I wanted at all, but what little there was made it worth it at least, specifically the first hour or so. only the first hour or so. I think my biggest problem is that the game just isn't my interpretation of Lovecraft, but someone else's. Someone's wrong interpretation, an interpretation with really pointless shoehorned in references to the time period, like music and political figures for some reason.
I don't like heroes, Mr. Walters.
And I don't care for your opinions, whoever the hell you are.
J. Edgar Hoover, from the Bureau.
If you can look past that though, then you're in luck, because what you've got is a really fun, standout survival horror game. Where did that come from? Not caring just helps your enjoyment a lot, so just sit back, have fun, and don't do anything I wouldn't do. Like have fun.